Hey, how you doing? You in particular, how you doing right now? Doing all right? Cool. I'm all right. I'm just having some coffee at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I like drinking my coffee in the afternoon. I don't drink it in the morning. I'm weird. But anyway, anything One Piece based going on right now? Anything at all that anybody's talking about? I don't know. Oda really hasn't revealed anything crazy lately. It's probably going to be a while. Elbaf is honestly kind of disappointing, right? Like, we really haven't found out anything. I haven't really been paying attention. I think we showed up and then, like, they were in that Lego city. Are we still in the Lego city? What if everything turns out to still be in the Lego city? They were still unconscious the whole time. Like, that was what's going on, yeah. No. Okay, we got a lot of stuff to break down. I made a few videos talking about the mural, well, the review, and then the video on the mural. I was going to immediately make a video on the Harley text. So tomorrow I'm doing a video with Artur. Okay, me and Artur are going to do a collab. We're going to film it. I'm going to try to get it up as quick as possible, probably like tomorrow night at the earliest. And we're going to go through the Harley text kind of together. Okay, all the different versions and the translations of it. We're going to go through that. So look forward to that. Today, I decided let's talk about the other part of the chapter that kind of got overshadowed by the end because, like I said, and I still mean it, like, even I said it because of, like, in the moment, like, this is the greatest double-page spread in the history of One Piece. No, like, even a few days later, I'm still looking at this, and I'm like, no, I think this is really gonna go down as, like, we could get something better, like, later on. I mean, I'm sure when the One Piece is finally revealed, I'm sure that's gonna be a double-page spread. How do you even fit that into a double-page spread, though? Oda's going to have to make, like, Oda's going to have to invent the quadruple-page spread or, like, the octuple-page spread. The entire chapter is just going to have to be, you're going to have to, like, fold it out in, like, a giant poster of what the One Piece ultimately is. So that'll probably eclipse this, I'm assuming. But this is so crazy. It is so insane that, like, let's not forget earlier on in the chapter, we got the reveal of Shamrock Figureland, the brother of Shanks' sword, had a mythical zone. It's a model of a Cerberus. That's a big deal. Like, if that mural was not at the end of that chapter, if we didn't see the Harley text at the end of that chapter, like, this is all everybody would be talking about right now. Like, Shanks' brother has a cool mythical zone sword. But, like, that kind of gets glossed over, right? Or at least that's the thing that people talk about. I saw earlier this morning, O'Hara put up a video talking about it. So it's like, it took a few days for us to finally get to, like, hey, let's talk about this. It's just like, that's a big deal. That's actually a really, really big deal. Not even in just the context of Shamrock has a really cool sword, but also the fact that there's that theory for so long that Blackbeard has the Inu Inu no Mi model mythical zone Cerberus. Cerberus? Hades dog, okay? He has Hades dog's zone, and that's the reason Blackbeard can eat multiple devil fruits, because he has 3 heads, and that's like 1 head for each devil fruit or soul or whatever. That was a theory for a very, very long time, and seemed to be completely plausible. I mean, like, it seemed like it could have went that direction with it, and Oda totally had a plan for the Hades dog zone, but not in the direction we were thinking. I also love the way Shamrock just whipped it out, too. Right? Yeah, when Shamrock just pulled it out, it's just like, by the way, I have a sword that can do this. You also feel like he didn't even need to do it in the chapter. Like, basically, Loki threatened him. He's like, I'm gonna get back at you for what you did to my friends, all these animals and everything like that. And, but Loki was not compliant with them all the way up till this moment, right? Like, Gunko was torturing the shit out of him, and Loki kept laughing in their faces and telling them, you guys suck. I'm never joining the Celestial Dragons. I'm never being part of your scum. I have standards. I might be chained to a tree, but I have standards. Even if you murder every single one of my friends, I'm still not going to listen to you, because screw you, right? Like, he's doing that thing the entire time. And then it was the one, I guess that just the straw that broke the camel's back at the very end. He says to, Shamrock, he's just like, I'm going to get you back for what you did and everything. And then he's like, I guess I have a grudge against 2 brothers now, right? And then that was the thing that made Shamrock be like, you threatening me? Well, check this out. Let me just show you how cool I am. I have a sword that can turn into a giant dog, the guardian of the underworld, all right, that exists between the line, the nexus point of living and dead, that makes sure no souls wander out of the underworld, that they stay there. And I have that dog as my sword. Like, right? Okay. So, let's break that down. Let's break that down. By the way, I was consulting my own Harley texts. I was consulting mythology. And I don't know. It might surprise you guys. It might not. But turns out there's nothing in this book about Cerberus being able to rotate their heads and fly off like a helicopter and have swords poke out of their mouths. That's... You know, Greek mythology is pretty weird. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of weird, jacked up stuff that happens in this, but that Oda himself came up with a clever idea on that one because, yeah. So, Cerberus. I've always said Cerberus. That, like, I guess that's not the correct pronunciation, but whatever. So, originally, I'll just go through some quick overviews here. Is first mentioned in the Iliad. That was around 8th century BC, so quite some time ago. In that story, though, I think he's only referred to as the Hound of Hades. So it was mentioned that Hades likes to have a doggo. Hades has dogs, okay? And there's a Hound of Hades. Later on in the 7th century, so like 100 or so years later, you get a little bit more about him. He's called Cerberus there, except in this version, he now has 50 heads. So it's kind of like, you know, this multiple-headed creature demon that lives in the underworld, right? The whole point of Cerberus, as I mentioned earlier, was he is the guardian. He is the guard dog of the underworld, okay? Souls leave the world of the living, go down into the underworld. You know, you got Charon down there with the boat and everything. Hades is chilling. He's the brother of Poseidon and Zeus, and he kind of rules over the place. Persephone's there, right? Okay, you got some pomegranates and all that kind of jazz, right? Well, obviously, like, what happens if those souls in the underworld want to be like, hey, I don't really like the underworld, man. I want to go back up topside. I want to see my, like, family. I want to see what's up with them. I want to go back up. Well, the Greeks' answer to that was like the reason why they just can't go back upstairs is because of Cerberus, because Cerberus is sitting there guarding the gate like, hey, no, if you try to get out, giant three-headed dog with gnashing teeth is going to rip you apart, I guess. And then, you know, that's not good. So it's like, okay, so that's literally the job there. It's the idea that death is ultimately final. Okay, you cannot come back once you're dead. You're gone. You're in the underworld, and that's kind of how the Greeks kind of, you know, personified it in the form of a giant dog. Okay, like that's the idea. Okay, so that's an interesting comparison to Shamrock, who is a celestial dragon that lives up in Marijua, and just even earlier in that chapter was talking about how, oh yeah, my younger brother Shanks. One time, he did return to the Holy Land, but he decided that he would rather live in this filthy lower realm with you. You know, it's very ironic that he would say that, given the fact that his sword turns into a dog that is the guardian of the underworld. All right, and it's kind of funny. It would also be really, and I mentioned this with the griffin. I erroneously said that it was a lion with like the wings of an eagle. It's a lion body with the head of an eagle. All right, and it's used a lot in terms of like pure power and strength, like the king of the animals of the land and the sky in one entity, in one chimeric being, which is the griffin, all right? So that's so beautiful if Shanks' sword could actually turn into a griffin, just like Shamrock's sword can actually turn into a Cerberus. One is the guardian of the underworld in the lower realm, which is what Shamrock detests so much, whereas you have Shanks, who has the griffin that could soar through the sky and be free and just is the king of beasts and stuff. That's a pretty cool idea in terms of like opposites and stuff. Loki even mentioned that Shamrock and Shanks would be the antithesis of one another, one being a celestial dragon, one being a great pirate. It's also important to mention that that term great pirate, before the term Yonko was ever used in One Piece, great pirate was used to describe Shanks. Like there's an actual term for that. He's described as that at the beginning of the story, and he's also described by that, funny funnily enough, during the movie Dead End Adventure, in the fourth One Piece movie, the first one that actually has like a theatrical runtime and stuff, that was the one with Shuraya, the guy who uses a shovel, he kind of looks like Sabo, and Gasparde, who's like the candy Logia guy, right? Well, there's a moment in the bar in kind of the opening parts of the movie where Shuraya and Luffy and Gasparde get in this big scuffle, and Luffy mentions Shanks by name, and Shuraya says, Shanks, the great pirate. This was back in, like, I think that movie came out in, like, 2002, 3. It was, like, right after Alabasta. So the Yonko term had not been around yet. So that's the term they use to describe Shanks, okay? So Shanks is a great pirate. He's an emperor. And then you have Shamrock, commander of the Gods Knight, not supreme commander of the Gods Knights, but a commander of the Gods Knights, and, you know, one of the greatest celestial dragons of all time, and they're the opposites of one another. And that'd be great if we really explored that further. By the way, side tangent, and this is something I didn't even realize, and I'm looking at the comments, and it's really funny. How did Loki know what Shamrock looked like? He has bandages covering his eyes. So either two explanations for this. Number one, well, I guess three, I suppose. Number one, the bandages don't actually obscure his vision. They're just aesthetic. Like maybe maybe that's not even what the Giants did to him. Maybe he just likes to wrap that around his eyes or something. I don't know. Maybe he could see perfectly fine out of them. I don't know. The other explanation is his observation hockey is just so damn high-spec that he could see people's faces, which would be insane because I don't even think Fujitora could do that. Fujitora has some of the best observation because he's blind, but even then we see kind of like how Fujitora sees the world, and he sees people as like these vague like shapes of like aura or like energy that's like kind of like passing by him like this, or he doesn't actually see facial features. He specifically says he cannot see facial features because when he's talking to Luffy, he's like, hey, meeting people like you makes me kind of wish I never blinded myself so I could actually see what you look like, Luffy, right? So even Fujitora couldn't see that. But maybe Loki's, you know, observation is so good. Or I guess it could be a Devil Fruit ability, I guess is the third option. Like, it's because of the Devil Fruit power that he could see, even though maybe it overwhelms his senses. Maybe it's a Devil Fruit power that's so crazy strong, it's like overwhelming. So he has to like bind his eyes and so he can't see, and it's also like the chains are weakening him, but he could still use the Devil Fruit ability. Okay, he's still conscious. The fact that he's chained to a tree with all that sea prism and he's still even conscious be a good indication of how strong Loki is. All right, but even then, maybe with the sea prism he still needs to like blind himself, but he could still see. Maybe it's just that strong of a Devil Fruit ability, right? Okay. So, going back to the sword, all right, so Shamrock's like, I don't need to dirty my hands on somebody like you. He pulls out his sword, and the sword transforms. It actually was very reminiscent of, I should have mentioned this in the review, when Alucard summons Baskerville, you know, the Hound of the Baskerville, you know, from, you know, in Helsing, and shows up, and just like, there's just this big hairy glob of just teeth and claws and eyes that's just bubbling out of Alucard when he goes into that form, and it's just that basically was what it reminded me of. Okay, and so creates this giant dog with white fur and spiked collars, and that's Cerberus, and 3 heads. Okay, now it doesn't stop there. Also the ribbon, I forgot to bring up the ribbon, the fact that there's a ribbon around Cerberus, which would indicate that this is an awakened zone user, or is it? Well, we'll get back to that in a moment. So Shamrock could have just commanded Cerberus to just attack Loki at that point, just like, I'm not going to fight you, my sword will. My sword is badass enough to kick your ass on its own. I don't even need to do anything, right? And then, like, Cerberus could have just jumped and just started, like, clawing and just biting the crap out of Loki. And then there you go. I think the message would have gotten across. But no, it goes even further than that. The heads begin to spin like helicopter propellers, like Sasaki, you know, and then they just detach from the body, and then they float around in the sky, and then swords pop out of the mouths, and then they all dive bomb Loki at the same time, and Loki himself's like, oh, that's not good, and then they all slam into him at the same time, and he screams in pain, right? So that's the name of the attack. Well, the attack, well, it doesn't really have a name. It was he says scramble, you know, like deploy, you know, when he activates the ability, right? I'm going to scramble your insides. I'm going to turn your stomach into scrambled eggs. You know, okay. So I think the whole separating the heads and spinning, that's such an Oda maneuver. I'm thinking that's probably the way that Cerberus would have actually hunted. The same way that, like, when Queen transforms into the Brachiosaur, it can detach its head like a snake, or when King is at the Pteranodon and, like, stretches out his head with the crest and then it fires a shot. We didn't really see what Jack could do. How did the mammoths fight back in the day? How would the mammoth have fought? I don't know. Like, it turns out the tusks turn into swords and impale its enemy, right? That's just Oda having fun. Or, like, Sasaki with the frill that allows him to fly. That's just Oda having fun with dinosaurs and, like, different, like, anatomy and stuff like that. I have a feeling almost that was what he's like, this was the reason why Cerberus was feared in mythology. It could detach its heads and then attack the enemy that way, okay? Now, the sword aspect of this is obviously because whatever this is, whether it's a mythical zone or another ability, it's given to the sword, not to Shamrock, okay? Now, obviously, the big thing would be, because we've already seen Funkfried. We've already seen a sword with the power of a devil fruit before. This is just taking it one level higher and having a mythical zone, okay? And for right now, I'm going to say that might be the case, okay? I'm more in line with it being a mythical zone because we've already kind of seen this established with Spondum rather than it being another ability. But there are some ideas on why it could be another ability, so we'll get to that. But if that's the case, it also kind of means something for Gunko. I'm not really sure. But, like, the idea is, okay, we still don't know the process of how exactly you give an inanimate object a devil fruit, a zone, but there's a way to do that. You think maybe we would have found that out in Egghead, but we didn't. But hey, Lilith is still around. Maybe she can explain it at some point, like when Luffy, Zoro, and Nami run into Shamrock or at some point. Maybe they're like, oh, he has a zone sword, you know, and then maybe Robin sees it. Maybe she'll recognize it from Spondum and stuff. Frankie also dealt with it as well. So they go back and tell Lilith, and Lilith's like, oh, yeah, this is how you add a devil fruit to an object, and she goes through the whole process, like, step by step. That would be really handy if we could get that, right? So what is the other idea that, you know, I keep bringing up? Okay, well, the idea is all of these abilities are not devil fruits. All of these abilities, including the Gorosei abilities, are abilities that Emu is handing out. Emu is like the being that has all these powers and is handing them out to their most loyal followers, okay? So when the Gorosei all crashed down at Egghead and they all turned into their yokai forms, you know, Saturn was an Ushione and Peter was a sandworm, okay? And then you have Ethan, Baron, Venus, Juro, that was the Bokotsu, the skeleton horse, and then we have the Hoki, which was Top Man, and then we had the Itsumare, which was Mars. Yes, they looked like mythical zones for sure. They had the ribbons. They're capable of hybrid forms, like Ethan Baron went into a full horse, but then he immediately went into a centaur horse. So, like, clearly they have the same kind of ideas as a mythical. They're classified a lot of times in mythical and stuff, but, like, they didn't actually say what the name of their abilities were. It just kind of said these are the yokai they transform into, and that's kind of it, right? Then we get to Gunko. Her ability was specifically stated to be the Arrow no Mi, and it is an ability, though, that does look a lot like that arrow tail that stabbed Sabo and Cobra during the events of the Reverie. So a lot of people were thinking, oh, maybe Emu, like, contracted out their power and gave it over to Gunko for this mission. And then you also have Shamrock that's able to create a Cerberus, which is, like, not a yokai, but, like, you know, the sandworm's not a yokai either. The sandworm is kind of just a sandworm, right? It's from Dune. But it's like, you know, these mythical creatures could be also a deal. The idea is that what if Emu, like, I always keep saying Eem. Everyone always asks, why do you call Emu Eem? It's just one of those things that I got into the habit of saying, like, years ago, and it's hard to correct myself, I guess, with that. But, like, Emu, right? Like, Emu does not like devil fruits, especially if Emu is, like, god of the sea, is, like, Mother Nature or connected to Mother Nature in some way. So has a different set of abilities that they pass out to their most loyal followers. But that also immediately falls apart because it was specifically stated, Gunko has a devil fruit power. So Gunko has a devil fruit power. I guess it could be both. You could have Emu giving Gunko a devil fruit ability, but if that's the case, then that means that Emu is not the god of the ocean or Mother Nature. It's either Emu has a distaste for devil fruit users and does not want any of them working directly under them, or Emu doesn't give a shit about devil fruit users. And you could just say the Gorosei are mythical. Also, we know Gunko has a paramecia, maybe a Logia, but probably a paramecia. And then here, for Shamrock's sword, it's a mythical as well. You know, it's either, so let me know down below, does Emu hate devil fruits or do they just not care? You know, because that's kind of the big one here we're going to find out about, right? Dude, what if Emu has the ability to, like, generate devil fruits? What if Emu has the power to, like, I can just create a devil fruit if I want? You know, so the Goro say, like, Peter goes up to Emu and is like, I want to become the most terrifying creature ever. A sandworm. And then Emu's like, all right. The process is probably disgusting, but it pukes out a devil fruit and just gives it to Peter and just, okay, there you go. Maybe that's the case. And then Shamrock is like, I don't really want a devil fruit because I would rather be able to swim, but could you give my sword a devil fruit? You know, maybe it's like Emu can generate devil fruit abilities, but it was Vegapunk's technology that allowed them to, you know, give it to inanimate objects, because maybe Emu wasn't able to do that, just create a devil fruit. It's like, can you make a really cool Cerberus Zone, like Hades' pet doggo? And then Emu's like, okay, pukes out that, hands it off to Shamrock, and then they use that technology to, you know, add it to the sword, and then there you go. That's what you got, right? Okay. But it also, kind of walking back from that whole idea, it's one or the other, but like I said, I'm going with mythical right now. It gives you a completely different idea on how Shamrock and Shanks fight. I love these little subtle differences that Oda's kind of throwing in. I mean, we've just met Shamrock, really, but just after just like one chapter and the one panel we got before this in 1137 where he was introduced properly, like, Shanks is always the dude that if he's gonna fight, he's gonna fight, right? Like, he's gonna take out his sword and he's gonna fight head on. We've seen him take out that sword against Akainu. We saw him use the sword against Kid. He didn't need to use the Kamusari against Eustace Kid. Well, maybe he did. Maybe that was the only way to stop the disaster. He had to go full power. Shanks is, like, facing off against Eustace, and he's like, I won't be able to stop that damned punk cannon with only 80% of my power. I gotta go 100%. Ah, you fool. Why were you assuming that Kamusari that wrecked Kid's shit was 100% Shanks? That could have only been 10% of what he was capable of. You don't know. You don't know. But you know Shanks is like, I'm gonna pull out my sword. I'm gonna get into the thick of it. I'm gonna fight. Hands on. That's how Shanks does it. Shamrock is like, I'm not even gonna bother. You know, I'm gonna have this, you know, I'm going to have this other creature I can create fight my battles for me, which is also kind of the idea. Like, that would be really cool if Shanks' sword could turn into a griffin. We've just never seen it up till now because Shanks maybe really likes the griffin. Shanks is like, I don't want to have this griffin fight my battles for me. I like the griffin. The griffin is my friend. Summons the griffin, and then Shanks is just like petting it and just like, oh, you're a good chimera being, aren't you? And I don't know what sound a griffin would make. I don't know if it's more eagle screech or lion roar, but one of the two, some mixture of both of them. It's just horrifying. It's just, and then all of the members of the Red Force are like, that's the most horrifying sound ever. But Shanks is like, oh, good boy. It's like, and then so you don't get to see the griffin very often because Shanks is like, I'll fight my own battle. I don't need to, you know, summon the griffin and fight for me or whatever. That's assuming his sword could turn into an actual griffin, but I don't know. I'm holding on to that hope because I kind of want to see that, right? I want to see, dude, that'd be so cool. Shanks summons the griffin and he flies around on top of it. Dude, that'd be so sweet, right? Flies around on top of the griffin, gets way ahead, jumps off. The griffin turns back into the sword form, and then Shanks just dive bombs, you know? Maybe that's how he arrived at Marineford so quickly. People are always trying to figure that out. Like, hey, he was, you know, at Marineford so fast after fighting Kaido. Maybe Shanks can fly. Maybe. That's cool. So Cerberus is able to create the swords because it is a sword. I don't think that's a natural thing that's occurring. I think the head thing is the floating thing. That's because of just Oda having fun. But the sword thing is because it's a sword. It could also generate swords any part of its body. Like the Cerberus could probably like run into you, turn its claws into swords, its teeth into swords, and just shred you if it wanted to. Or it could just run up to you, start biting into you, and then the heads could spin that way, and then that could just rip you like you're getting hit by a blender. You know what I mean? Like, it could be something crazy like that. So that's the hybrid form. Like we saw Funkfried taking its trunk and turning the trunk into a sword that it used to like attack Frankie. Okay, so we've kind of seen this kind of stuff before already with the hybrids, okay? But we could assume the Cerberus has its own personality, just like Funkfried had its own personality. But it would be interesting if, so Funkfried, was, I don't know, like Spondum was a piece of shit, but from what we can kind of see with Spondum's backstory, he was kind of nice to Funkfried. He was nice to the elephant, right? He wasn't like a horribly abusive to the elephant. But in the case with Shamrock, maybe Shamrock is using Conqueror's Hockey to like subjugate the sword dog, of just like, you will obey me kind of thing. Whereas if Shanks had Griffin as an actual Griffin, it was more of like, nah, you're my friend. We're partners. We fight together kind of thing. I don't know. I think a lot of people are probably going to be like, Shanks' sword can't turn into an actual griffin. It's like, but it could. It could. Shanks barely shows up in this story. If you want to reveal Shanks' sword could have done that the entire time, it's not like it would really have to retcon anything. You know what I mean? It's just like we haven't really seen Shanks in a lot of battles. Yeah, there it is. Okay. Well, anyway, that's the video. Just wanted to kind of talk about Shamrock's sword and his ability, talk about Cerberus, talk about Shanks a little bit, talk about how Loki could see things through a bandage. That's what we're up to today. A lot of stuff coming down the pipeline. Yeah, but tomorrow we're going to be doing a collab, me and Artur. Try to get that out tomorrow night. If it's not out tomorrow night, then probably Tuesday morning is when that'll be up. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for all the support. And yeah, here it is. And still, there's a chapter this week, which is crazy. Such a crazy cliffhanger. And Oda is just, he's not stopping, man. He's pumping the gas. He's going. It's just like, no, we're going to go 4 chapters in a row. Let's freaking go. That's what also makes me think that the reason why there's no break is Oda really wanted this chapter and maybe the next chapter, 1139, to be companion pieces to one another. Like, no, I don't want there to be a 2-week break in between. These next two, 1138 and 1139, need to be back-to-back. Maybe, that's my own personal opinion on it, but maybe there is significance to the fact that we have 4. Who knows? All right, thanks for watching, everybody. Tekking, signing out.